My name's Jason Tully. I'm the special counsel to the director of the Public Defender Service for the District of Columbia for forensic issues. So Chris McKee, who you heard earlier, had the job for a while, and then he went to Colorado, and I've taken that for the last few years. And so my job is to keep up on forensic issues, manage the forensic issues in our office, figure out how we staff them, and figure out how we get training for our attorneys. Why don't we start, just go around the room and you can let us know, folks, let us know where you're from. We'll start over here.
St. Louis, sorry.
And what, your name and where you're from?
Oh, sorry. St. Louis.
Great.
I'm Brendan Max from Chicago Public Defender's Office.
I'm Elizabeth Kidd from Lexington, Kentucky.
Tom Doolin, Albany, New York, for the conflict defender in Albany.
Leon Monday, Kansas City, Missouri.
Jerry Manning from the Public Defender's Office in Nashville, Tennessee.
Jerry Dirk from Marion, Indiana.
Robert Koppel from the Miami-Dade County Public Defender's Office.
Ron Lewis, McLean County Public Defender's Office, Bloomington, Illinois.
Larry Madden, Massachusetts.
Bob Hill from Indianapolis, Public Defender Agency.
Donna Armstrong, Shelby County Public Defenders, Memphis, Tennessee.
Kathy Burns, short for Sylvia, from Carthage, Missouri. Ann Sutton from Marion County, here, Public Defender Agency.
Sheila Paolino, Hamilton County Public Defender, which is Cincinnati, Ohio.
David Sharplett from Marion County Public Defender Agency here in town. And I'm Norm Levstein from the law school.
Great.
Larry Landis, Indiana Public Defender Council.
Okay, so we've got Florida, Massachusetts, out to Missouri, all in the Midwest in between. That's great. I think as we talk about staffing of forensic cases and training of your lawyers, it's not just going to be me talking about the narrow areas that I know, but sharing the different experiences and different strategies that we have in our different offices so that we can all learn from each other. And with that, I'd actually like to start by having you turn to your neighbor and take 4 minutes with your neighbor to talk about the sort of issues or difficulties that come up in your office surrounding forensic cases, and then we'll go around and hear from the different groups after we're done. So go ahead and turn to your neighbor, find a partner, and just talk back and forth a little bit. All right, if we could finish up the last few thoughts with each other. Okay. Great. Okay, so we'll go around the room and hear what some of the issues are. We have one person from each team just give a little short pick of the things that you talked about with your partner. Pick one or two that sort of came up in your discussions. So, and again, sorry, I'll start over here again, but go ahead.
I'll speak for Linda Knight. She's from St. Louis. I'm from Chicago, and two kind of different sets of problems that we're dealing with. First is that there's really no formal forensic unit. The cases come in quick. You don't know which case, because their docking system is going to be assigned to go to trial, and it's hard to prepare to litigate these issues.
Right, complex stuff. Yeah.
In our office, we have a forensic unit of 10 attorneys, and I would say the big problem we face right now is we are become so popular in terms of consultation. We have to start figuring out how far a consultation needs to go in each case, what's due diligence, and what requires more. And that's a staffing and a prioritizing decision that we're struggling with right now.
Okay, great. Next group.
Well, I spent a lot of time talking about Kentucky, which is where I'm from, and we're trying to get sort of a centralized listserv or somewhere where we can keep all of our forensics information, expert witness lists, any kind of resources as far as forensics. There's no centralized location where everybody around the state can access that. So that's what we've been working on, and we're just getting started. And he was telling me about, he's from upstate New York, and they do have something that's similar to that, and it's very handy for everybody to access.
Okay, great. Yeah, issues about sharing resources and how to let everybody know what's going on. Next.
I'm Jerry. I'm from Nashville. This is Leon.
Jerry.
He made me do all the talking. I was telling him that in Nashville, we're an office of about 43 attorneys, and pretty much our training on forensics is every man for himself. we're still operating under the system that it's every lawyer's responsibility to be educated about your case.
Right.
And so I'm here to try to hear what other kind of strategies other offices are employing. And Leon was explaining to me that their office is not much smaller than ours, and pretty much their cases get assigned based on your level of experience, not necessarily because you have a subspecialty in any particular area.
Right.
Where's Leon from?
Kansas City.
Okay.
Okay.
We're both from Indiana. David's from the big city here in Indianapolis, the huge city. I'm from Marion, Indiana, and we have no training in-house. We're all part-time contract public defenders. There's 12 of us. We have one full-time chief public defender. You're saying you're basically in charge of training for the offices, so they have a set policy of training their lawyers. We have none. We're trying to implement it, so we're looking at funding and trying to get to county. Prosecutor's office gets all their training paid for, and we just kind of on our own. So
right.
It's money.
Yeah, the discrepancy between government and us is pretty
hard to get any sympathy.
What'd you say?
It's hard to get sympathy from the commissioners when we're defending the scumbags and they're the wearing the white hats. So.
Right. Yeah, it's hard. It's really hard. Guys.
I'm from Central Illinois and was looking to have some forethought as to what do we do now. For some reason, we've had it good compared to a lot of the rest of the country, but with the death penalty going away in Illinois, some of the downside of that for us in smaller offices is we used to be able to rely on a capital litigation office who had a lot of these forensic issues under their belt. And Brandon, I know you have your office, but a lot of our friends have lost their jobs on that and are elsewhere in this. So we're going to be doing it on our own, or the county's footing the bill now because our old funds are gone. The counties, as everybody else knows, they start kicking us in the shins real quick. So. Just getting ready to make other plans.
I just wanted to add to our conversation. We had a very interesting conversation because I'm from such a large office and he's from a small office. So we have almost 190 attorneys in our office. I think you have 14. Mm-hmm. 14. And there's such a difference in the training that goes on in the large office and the small office that he's the point person for forensics. Everybody goes to him, where when you're in a large office, you have more than one person to go to, and there's such an advantage. And one of the things that I wanted to come here for is we're developing, we're in the process that we're going to develop a central depository in our office. We take depositions in Florida also, which is an advantage, and a lot of people like to strangle me when I say that we get to do depositions, but we want to put everything in the central depository. Transcripts from depositions, cross-examination, names of experts, anything we can put in where the attorney can just go to that depository, press the button. And the IT people are very involved in this project in our office, so that's the goal that we have with me going back to the office after the conference.
Right. Yeah. So resource issues and how to share them in different sized offices. Yeah.
I think it can be summed up what we talked about in one word: money.
Yeah.
Money for experts.
Training.
All right. Well, I wish I got it today. It's going to work.
In Indiana, we've traditionally relied on the Public Defender Council for training because the model for all the agencies is what Jerry goes through, which would be a part-time office. It has been that in the past, Marion County being the one exception. And so we've become dependent and reliant upon the Public Defender Council in Indiana to provide that training, to provide resources. Our expert resource database probably needs updating. I don't know if it's been updated in a while. We try to present forensics and training programs statewide annually that are fairly well attended. Death penalty seminar is one. This year we're having to transpose the death penalty seminar to more of a homicide seminar because there's just not enough death penalty work in the state at this point to justify just focusing on death penalty stuff. But that's generally where I don't know who said it over here, but that's kind of where we get that. But to me, the biggest problem is cash.
Right. So money and resources.
Money for training, money for experts, money to have individuals that you could just say, you're just going to be our DNA guy.
Right.
We do have people in the office who have wealth of experience, but they share it on an informal as opposed to a formalized basis.
Okay.
I think Donna's from Shelby County, Tennessee, and has a much larger office, 70-plus attorneys compared to Carthage, Missouri, which has 15 attorneys and is actually one of the larger offices in Missouri. And money is a problem. They have to go through a judge to get approval to hire an expert in a case, and then go to a court, state court office to get the money. And it sounds like that presents a lot of challenges. And I think in our office, it's probably more the lack at this point of knowledge of what's out there to even try to get, because we haven't been turned down for money yet, which indicates to me we're not asking enough.
Okay, great. So issues with money again, and figuring out what exactly is out there, the playing field of it.
Ann is from Marion, and I'm from Cincinnati. It was very similar. Money to obtain experts.
This is the money side of the table.
It is the money side. It comes directly out of our budget, and mine both. So that's an issue. The other issue is also the training aspect. There's either not very good training in the area, or it's expensive to send people to training.
Right.
And a list somewhere of good experts would be very, very helpful on a listserv, and especially if they could be regionalized where you can garner somebody locally, because it's very interesting to have a judge tell you, outsiders don't belong in here. So. You deal with it, but hey.
Yeah, that's hard.
We're not really a team, we're just friends.
Okay.
I don't think we have anything to contribute, we're just kind of...
But I can report on my office.
Yeah, great.
The Indiana Public Defender Council is a state agency that is a resource center. We don't do any litigation, so Indiana is a county-based, county-funded system. What we do in this area is we have an expert witness directory that's online, and we don't really have any staff that is an expert resource. But I see systemic issues beyond just the money issue, because what we could be doing that we don't do is the systemic problem of lawyers not seeing themselves as part of an organization and part of a team. It's really difficult for us to get to lawyers, and we have 1,100 lawyers in the state who are members of our council by statute, to get them to send us transcripts, to get them to send depositions, to send names of expert witnesses that they had good or bad experiences. It's very difficult. We cannot get, we can digitize it, we'll put it online, we can make it available, but lawyers tend to be so myopic. Once that case is over, that file is closed, they're on to the next.
Off to the bar.
Like, what can I do in this case that's going to help build a resource for everybody in the state?
Right.
If we had all 1,100 people seeing themselves as part of a team, that would change the whole dynamic without any additional resources. You don't need money, you just need an attitude.
Right.
So
very fractured system.
It is. That's a good description. Fractured.
I was going to say half-baked, but that phrase is another one I've used.
It is? Well, it is.
But I was chairman of the Public Defender Commission for 17 years, and he left it unfinished business.
They went to reappoint me. They insisted on appointing a libertarian, but he didn't want to name a Democrat.
But the one area where an informal exchange has occurred has been in capital litigation. I think that capital lawyers frequently communicate amongst themselves, and we've used this expert, we've used that, and there are transcripts that fly back and forth there. But it's not. I agree. It's not formalized. It's not centralized.
Right.
Which makes the Illinois experience very interesting. It's the downside of losing capital.
Right.
You wouldn't have thought there'd be a downside of
Right.
Well,
the trickle down is
right. But there is in our state too, because we're down to like 4 pending cases in the entire state of Indiana. And you see the downside is you lose that camaraderie, you lose the communication of the experienced court litigators. You have
the reason to
alternative way to
take away the
that
common enemy.
because the importance of death penalty cases is just forced. Right? I would be able to think, but how do you build the same thing in non-capital?
One of the things that I just noticed, I'm from Memphis, from Shelby County. I'm sure it's been around all along, which is tactile, and I don't know if Ms. Manning is part of the tactile or not, but they've got a list server now, and for some reason people are just kind of beginning to get into it. And I've noticed now, we're getting more communication, so now we're getting like the list of experts that people are putting on, and they can get on the list server now and say, well, have you ever, dealt with this particular judge or this particular expert? What can you tell me about it? But for some reason, I've been there for a little over 20 years now. It seems like now it's just now beginning to start with it, and it's looking like it's going to be a real good thing.
So listservs within the state, so people can talk and communicate. Did you finish something over here?
I was just saying, for us, I think it's not getting money for the experts, it's the time, because the way I was explaining this, the way our docket system works in the city of St. Louis is that we have a central docketing system, so everything goes to one division, and then on whatever docket day it rolls around, they get sent out to all the different trial divisions. Well, you can have literally 15, 20 cases on that docket that you have to be ready to try that week, and you don't know which one's going to go. So you could have, theoretically, a DNA case, a fingerprint case, and a gun case all the same week. And the time in trying to get everything together on, people just don't have the time because they're so scrambled all the time.
So the money stuff, after checking my wallet and the schedule, I think there's going to be some more conversation about that with other folks later over the course of the program. The caseload stuff that we're talking about here in St. Louis, and I know is a problem a lot of places, is also something that I think there's going to be a separate presentation on. Norman from NACDL, Norm Reamer, and Adele, who you'll meet at some point, are really working hard on pushing the ABA's caseload limit work and trying to provide lawyers with resources for the folks you're supervising, for yourselves, to fight back when you're in a position where you can't do an adequate job because you just have too many cases and the caseloads are too high. In your materials, you'll see the latest writings on that from the ABA. But talking then more about some of the shared resources issues. We'll sort of go through some of those, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the experiences that we've had or I've seen in other offices or other people have had. So the folks mentioned the transcript bank. Some folks, who's got a transcript bank that they sort of have experts that they have access to?
We have a bank, but
not yet.
But we have depots for police officers, battery police officers.
This is something that takes effort, right? Getting them to send in the transcripts. I have an office with only 100 attorneys, and I can't get them to send me transcripts, and I'm not even talking about a whole state. I feel for you, trying to get folks from all over the place. One of the places that we've gone to get the transcripts is to the appeals division. Sometimes they're a little slower in their pace, and sometimes it feels to me that they're a little more responsible than us in the trial division. And so they have the transcripts in their office. And so, I have a guy from the law school who we got in for the summer, and one of the things we're having him do is I'm having him go to every appeals office and look through all of their transcripts and taking their transcripts and scanning them in and putting them in our database. He's a law student. I could get if you talk to a college intern or someone even lower, I bet you could teach them to recognize an expert testimony in transcript and put it in a database if you have one, right? And then as going forward, one of the things that we had a problem with early on was we had them in a database, but it wasn't really organized. And so if a lawyer had a trial, searching it was daunting to try to figure out And so we have them by subject, and this is all like, this is not me, this is some whiz kid from college who knows how to scan things in so you can search them and break them into different folders so they're easy to find, and sort of taking advantage of the young whippersnappers. I don't, maybe I don't look 40, but I've been practicing for 16 years, and so I rely on these folks greatly on issues of all issues of technology, and this one in particular. And so it's organized by, the transcripts, at least that we have, are organized by subject matter. They're organized by the last name of the expert, and they're searchable for certain terms. So, yeah.
What seems to be the real issue, listening to everybody talk around the room, the real issue is how do we each bring what we learn here in the next couple of days to our offices, our regions, whatever. And I think the first question, I mean, there are a lot of people here from small offices. How do you connect with other offices to maybe do something together versus someone like me where I'm in Miami? My plan is to do an office-wide presentation for 190 attorneys, but it's easier for us to do that because we have everybody there. So I guess the real question is, how does everybody here go home and put something together to do a presentation for the attorneys in your office or in your region? Because everybody has a different circumstance of who they train. And I think that's something that's worthwhile to discuss about getting people to think how they're going to be able to present this information when you get back to your office.
Right, and that's part of this session and part of the next session with Chris McKee, but let's talk about that for a moment. So you're going to do a training in your office.
Our goal is when we get back, and a lot of ideas have been stimulating as I've been sitting here and in the training, is we're going to do an office-wide training. We actually have done a couple trainings. We've brought some people in from other places to do. We did an all-day forensic training about 2 years ago. We had people come from D.C. and some other places, and we opened it up to other attorneys in the South Florida area, so it wasn't just to public defenders. But the goal that we have, and Carlos Martinez, who's the public defender, is we want to have some trainings just for our office that could be like 2 half-day trainings to talk about discovery, to talk about depositions, to talk about pretrial motions, to talk about direct and cross-examination, to have a full training for the attorneys. And the number one thing is most people fear forensics. That's the thing. When they see that they have a forensic case, a fingerprint case, a DNA case, immediately they become very fearful. And we have a couple people who are really good at it, but you can't have just 2 people know what to do. You need everybody in the office to be able to do this stuff. And I think you mentioned that before, that you want all the attorneys to be able to become sort of knowledgeable and experts in the area. And the only way you do that is by training.
So the smaller offices, do you guys have thoughts about how linking up with other smaller offices in your areas, or how you're going to go back and spread this around? The folks around the table who are from smaller offices. Missouri, Indiana.
Yeah, my office is pretty small. I'm the alternate public defender in Albany County. We have a regular public defender. My office has 7 attorneys plus me, and the public defender's office has somewhere around 30 lawyers, I should say. We have a good working relationship, even though we are separate and apart, because we get the cases that they can't because there's a conflict. Gargoyle to as the conflict defender. I have a working relationship with the public defender. Formerly having been an assistant public defender, I know most of the attorneys in that office, so we don't have any issue in communication. The problem is actually getting information back and forth, even though those lines are open. But we'll be able to get together and set up some training for both of our offices, and probably open it up to the other lawyers on the assigned counsel list. So that shouldn't be a real big deal for us.
In Illinois, we also have the Illinois Public Defenders Association that has training in there hand in hand with the our state appellate level. Our appeals go to a statewide office, and they provide that, but it doesn't get to everybody because depending on the size of your county, there's some counties in Illinois where one person may be the public defender for 2 counties. and they just don't have the time to put down the files and get to a training. But there is a listserv that's put together by that. At a very bare minimum, somebody can throw out there, hey, has anybody heard of this doctor? It's a start, but I bet it could be better.
We'll go to Chicago.
You know, I heard a lot of people talk about training as being a big problem. And what we found when we started our forensic unit a bunch of years ago is that actually getting training is a little bit easier and a little bit less expensive than we thought it would be for two reasons. Number one, there are a lot of experts who want you to hire them in cases. And they will come and they're very good at what they do and they will train you. The same DNA companies, for instance, that we end up hiring on our cases often come and do training, and they do it for the cost of a flight and maybe a hotel room. It's not free to the office, but it's very cost effective to the office. Between experts who want you to hire them and other public defenders in the area or around the state or in neighboring states, we found that we can put on training that's very good and very in-depth for not a lot of money. Our office put on an annual DNA conference in conjunction with DePaul University in Chicago for minimal amount of money, because there's a lot of people ready and willing to do that.
It's a free conference, right? I've been like 3 times. It's great. Yeah.
It's almost nothing to put it on because the experts volunteer their time, and they're pretty willing if you ask them.
And so I think that's a great point. I can't reiterate that. We'll get to Norman in a second enough. You can find experts who want to come. You can find public defenders who will come for with no fee other than airfare, and maybe they'll sleep in somebody's spare bedroom. You know, because they're, at least the public defenders, like, they're doing it for the love of the work, just like you all are. And they're academics. Simon Cole is a leading fingerprint critic at a university in California, and he goes around the country for free in those trainings for folks. And Dan Crane's a DNA guy out of Dayton, Ohio. He goes around the country and does DNA trainings for free. Christine Funk, who's here and you'll hear from, does the best DNA 101 that I've ever seen. And she breaks it down with funny clips and interesting stuff in her Minnesota accent. And she'll spend a day and a half for free. Like, we have a Friday, every 2 years we do a Friday afternoon and an all-day Saturday. And so we fly her in Friday morning, we put her in a hotel room one night, and we kick her out Saturday night. And so I think that's right, that it's hard to find, but you call, you have our contact information, the trainers, you call me, you call Chris McKeno's folks, you call the folks in Chicago, their forensic office, and they can point you in the right direction for some of these folks who will come at minimal cost to help you learn stuff. Sorry.
I'm just kind of reflecting about all of this from a national standpoint. There are like 27 states or so that have a statewide program of some kind. And I don't know the extent to which it's done, but it's just obvious, just sitting through this morning's program, that it ought to be a high priority of any statewide program to develop at the state level the ability to train, and I suspect equally as important is the ability to draw upon expertise who can counsel on particular cases, which is what you do at PDS in DC. And those are two very separate things. You're never going to train all of the lawyers in the United States, I suspect, on forensic science. Public defenders in the United States now number over 15,000. But at the state program, that ought to be a high priority, although I know something about the caseloads in Missouri. I know about the litigation that's before the Missouri Supreme Court, and I know that Cat Kelly and in other states there are just enormous problems of getting the resources devoted to that. But that's really where it ought to be in any kind of statewide program, where you're talking about programs that are in states that don't have any kind of a unified system. You ought to have, Larry, somebody in your program that develops that expertise, ideally, although I know your resources are not unlimited either. But there needs to be some way to figure out in states where there is not a statewide program, some facility for that, whether it be in Illinois, your association, or whether it be in the Tennessee Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers in Tennessee, but you all, in a supervisory role or in a management role, need to be pushing for that. That ought to be something that the New York program that is now headed by Bill Leahy in New York, who isn't well funded either yet, but that ought to be a high priority of his. And it seems to me that some of the push for that needs to come from people who are in leadership, supervisory, management roles in various states around the country.
And some of the things we've hit on, really all the things that or most of the things that we've talked about in terms of what to push and what works in places. You know, whatever the group is, whether it's statewide or a number of counties together, listserv to share intelligence. Anyone had so-and-so in my trial. Transcript bank, list of experts, right? I think those are three things that a group, when someone is thinking about the forensics and what the resources are for a certain jurisdiction, or be it a state or whatever, should be focused on. And then there's the question of, and this is debated through different offices, does everyone get trained up on the forensics? Does it happen that you have a case and so you get trained up on that? And that's sort of the way it goes, or is there a dedicated unit? Like in Chicago, they've got a forensic unit that gets consults and they come in, and sometimes you come in and do motions or crosses, am I right, and then jump out of the case. Or is there a forensics unit or a couple people that go in, like in D.C., and we go and we get the attorney and the line attorney up to speed, but we don't, or very, very rarely, we're not going to stand up in court and be part of that. We want the lawyers in the front lines to learn it all, which is a very demanding, expectation. But then, so those are two models. There are different models. There are strengths and weaknesses to both of them.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
The forensic unit that you have, do they have their own caseload?
No, what happens is 10 attorneys in a 500 attorney office, and the other attorneys who are in the courtroom, they fill out a request when they get a case and say they get a load of DNA discovery. They don't know what it means.
Right.
They put in a request, we come, look at it, evaluate it, and decide how involved in the case we need to be.
Is there enough work for all the forensic attorneys to keep busy?
Oh, tons. Yeah, tons. It becomes very popular because the trial attorney can say, oh, I don't need to look at this. I just send this in our office to the forensic unit. It's out of my hair. And so you might do anything from evaluate that and consult to try the case.
And so we have a similar unit. We all have cases, though, of sort of a reduced load to some degree in our little forensic team that we have amongst the folks in D.C. I will say that part of my job description is to have you people call me. So it's actually written into the thing I applied for. 15,000, huh? But no, I mean, for real, honestly, we have a huge list of experts that has experts from all over the country, right? Like, I don't know every expert for blood spatter or SANE nurse in Kentucky, but we might have one in there, right? And if I learn from you, I'll add to my database of it. We've stolen a whole bunch of stuff from Chicago and Los Angeles that has a good forensic office. So we have fingerprint crosses and tool mark crosses and DNA motions, and my job is to share that stuff. So please call me. I think Chris McKee mentioned the program at Harvard, which is getting off the ground, and we're helping with them with materials. And also the NACDL has fantastic resources for stuff. And it's not just, here's a giant 50-page transcript or motion, but, and it's reading it and then calling and talking through the issues. And I love this. He gets a call from an attorney somewhere and they say, I've got this issue in a case. And I'm like, what's your case about? I'm like, let's start at the beginning. What is the government going to say? Right? What do we think the expert's going to say? And so, I have a low caseload, so I can spend my time chatting with you folks and returning your calls, and I'm eager to do it, or the people you supervise. We got sort of squeezed on time, and this session got squeezed. Does anybody else want to add a last thing before we go to lunch? Yeah.
One thing, because as we talk about identifying money and training, having done training for 30-some years, you can train people to have the knowledge base of the science, but one of the gentlemen down here talks about the fear. That still is the #1 barrier to effective training, because you can train people in trial practice that we have done for 30 years, and they go back and won't try what they just got trained to do because of fear. And dealing with an expert is one of the great fears, because it's one of the risks is you'll be humiliated and embarrassed.
That's right. That's why
one competent enough to take on somebody in a science base or knowledge base that you feel incompetent at. So unless we train and help overcome that, all of the resources in the world are not going to get people over that to be able to take on that expert, unless we deal with that performance anxiety that is there in the science area.
That's why one of the keys, I think, is when you do training, you do interactive training. You just don't have lecture-based training. You have them get up and actually do the things that they're going to do in the court, so at least they overcome that a little bit. And the more you do that, the more people get comfortable with it, and they can make mistakes. It's a better place to make a mistake instead of in front of a jury. So I think we should encourage our people.
They're going to get that confidence, which is what they need.
Yeah.
To build it slowly. So they need to really start on like a marijuana misdemeanor case. Take on an expert where even if you screw up, you know, somebody's not going away for 30 years.
Yeah, that's right.
I was going to say they need to start on marijuana.
There are some states you can do that.
And with that, we go cure our munchies with a little lunch. Thank you.